Joining us now on a Monday morning is the Prime Minister Christopher Luxon. Good morning, Prime Minister. Good to see you.
Good morning, Ryan. Welcome back.
Thank you. What are you doing down there? Are you avoiding me up here? What's going on?
No. You know where I can, I try and get to see you in the studio. But today we've actually got a really big announcement on earthquakes and our legislation around that, and how do we get a better balance between managing earthquake risk but also the cost associated with mitigating buildings around that as well. So down here for a big announcement at 2:30 around that, which will be really important.
Yeah, I saw that. I was going to ask you about it later, but we might as well do it now. So could save the country around $8 billion, because it went too far, right? We went a bit gung-ho on the regulation.
Yeah, look, I think the regulation was well intended, but the consequences of it, like a lot of things, has actually led to a lot of paralysis across the country. And you've got a lot of building owners that are, got their cash tied up in buildings that are either derelict and they haven't got the money to mediate. But also we've got to get a little bit more sophisticated in just managing risk, and actually that's not the same risk everywhere. It's not one size fits all. So essentially what Chris Pink and I will announce today is sort of a better balancing of all of that. And yes, that does have an $8 billion type benefit, which is money that can be spent back into the economy. But there's just, as you know, moving around the country, you probably run into it as well, is that you'll go to some towns and there's a lot of derelict buildings, and and the real reason is because the cost to remediate is actually greater than the cost of the building, and then the risk is actually very low. And so we just got to get the better balance of that.
All right. Hey, Palestine, have you had any reaction from the Americans at this point?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, we just made our own independent decision. We worked our way through the issue as we said we would. It was appropriate that we did actually, think about through our position again, given what we saw some of our friends doing. Some of our friends, as you know, have recognised, some haven't. And I think New Zealand made the right decision for us.
What about this idea that some have said they'll all be dead in Gaza by the time you recognise Palestine?
Well, look, I mean, I appreciate there's strong views on either side of that debate. There's also a large number of New Zealanders that don't have a view on it. What we're saying very strongly is, look, our focus has to be actually, exactly as you just said, on the conflict and actually getting to a ceasefire. For that to happen, both parties need to stop being so intransigent and actually come to the table, negotiate with diplomacy and actually find a way to get to a ceasefire. That requires two things, I think, Ryan. One is, Hamas as a brutal terrorist organisation has to release those hostages. And two, Israel, who's been grossly disproportionate with its response, needs to uphold international law by making sure aid and assistance can get into Gaza freely, make sure that they're protecting civilians and pull back from military action.
Here's the thing, though, Prime Minister, about all of this. Is the whole statement was prefaced on this. What we need in the meantime is more dialogue and more diplomacy, right, between these two countries. And yet we've learnt this morning that we've got the Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel coming here and none of you are meeting with her.
Well, again, we've made our position pretty clear to Israel on a number of issues about where we think,
but aren't you meant to be talking?
Ministerial statements, over that period of time.
What about
diplomacy?
Well,
we continue to do that through ambassadorial conversations. We have an ambassador here and we talk to the ambassador here. We also talk to the Palestinian Authority as well, and we continue to support the Palestinian Authority upgrading its governance and its institutions as well. So we talk to both sides. We're not pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. We're actually pro-peace, as I keep saying. We're friends to both. But for that to happen, we're a long way away from it. We need the regional actors to play the role that they're playing, trying to get both those parties to a better place. Otherwise, the suffering and the human catastrophe that has unfolded.
Yeah, I know, but here's your chance. You've got a government minister in the country to state this message, to make this claim, and you're not even taking the chance.
Well, we talk to Israel, we talk to the Palestinian Authority continually, and I can tell you foreign ministers have spoken at that level. We talk to ambassadorial level, and we'll continue to do so.
Hey, the Tikanga and law thing, where's that come from? Did you get, have you had international investors come to you and say this is a potential problem?
No, look, Goldsmith was at a Law Society debate or, being interviewed, and I think made a not unreasonable point, given some of the, if you think about the Peter Ellis case, and I think, arguably the decision maybe around gang patch returns, just saying all he was alluding to was, look, there's a role for it, but actually we've got to make sure it's really crystal clear for people to navigate, that actually you do get certainty. If you're an investor, you know that if you've got a remedy or a conflict that you need, that the legal system will deliver that for you. So that's the only point he was trying to make.
Right. So no one, just to clarify, no foreign investors have ever said to you, this is a problem?
No, okay. not at this stage.
Is the problem?
It was in the context of a Law Society conversation, which is, obviously quite technical and academic. He's just making the point, I think, not unreasonably, which is you need to know what you're signing up for if you're going to make an investment, and that's what we've done very well in New Zealand. We should be very proud of our legal system.
Is part of the problem that the treaty clauses aren't defined in law? The problem Seymour was trying to solve, that you stopped?
Well, that's the work that we are working through, which is not the treaty principles bill, but what we are doing is saying we've got a lot of legislation that's got just very generic, broad definition saying give effect to the treaty. And what we want to do is be much more specific with those clauses in legislation. And we're working our way through each of those pieces to say, let's be very clear about what the obligations are so that everybody understands what their obligations are to iwi and to Māori as under our Treaty of Waitangi expectations. But equally, we can't just have a broad, open-ended clause that's so generic that no one knows what they're supposed to be doing about that.
So what happens when you say that you're going through those at the moment? Can you just change them, or do you have to go through a consultation process to change them, or will you just change them unilaterally?
No, we'll go through a process where we take on some. There's some parts of different bits of legislation. It's just variable, Ryan. It's built up over a number of years, and what we're trying to do is give people certainty and clarity. But we have to go through a proper legal process, legislative process with.
All right. So there'll be public consultation.
Yep.
Okay. Right, let's move on then, talk about the energy sector. You've got this Frontier report coming out this week, and I've spoken to David Seymour this morning. It sounds like you're not going to go with breaking up the gentailers, but in terms of underwriting investment in more generation, the government doing that, how would that actually work?
Well, I think there's two things going on here. One is we've still got a massive job to do to make it easier and faster to do renewables. And as we've talked before, we want to double renewables. We've done a specific RMA amendment bill just in the last few months to be able to make renewables what's called a permitted activity, to make consenting within a year, extend the consents that already exist for those renewable assets. And we've got to double that amount of renewables over the next wee while. The real issue, as you identified, is really around thermal energy generation, which we're going to need when we have dry years, essentially, and when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. So, really, we've done a series of things, overturn the oil and gas ban. It would be great if Labor came on board and had bipartisan support for that. We've put some money aside as a contingency to co-invest with potential global investors for gas exploration. We have actually said to the gentailers, you will sell your electricity to the same price that you sell to your own retailing operations to your competitors, the smaller players as well, so we get more competition in the gentailer space. And we've also obviously expanded out coal reserves behind Huntly, which is not great, but from an emissions point of view, but in the absence of not having gas, sufficient gas, we have to rely on coal in the short term. So, and Simon Watts will have more to say about it later on this week as to what more we can do as well.
In terms of underwriting the generation?
In terms of our general approach to what more can we be doing, common sense stuff that we can be doing to make sure we've got energy security.
You're not going to be splitting up.
Have abundant, affordable electricity.
You're not splitting up the gentailers, though, are you? You can let people.
I'm not going to
know that this morning.
Yeah, I'm not going to get ahead of the announcement. It's coming shortly, and I'll let Simon talk to it all very shortly. And
do we have
the coherence of the whole policy?
Do we have too many energy regulators at the moment? We've got 3 separate regulators.
Again, I'm going to let Simon get into all of that.
Okay.
I mean, there are, we've taken a good look at the energy market and saying what can we do, despite what is a really challenging situation dealing with the consequences of any of that oil and gas ban and the shortfall that we have on thermal energy generation. What more can we be doing? Simon's got some common sense, practical ideas around that, which he'll talk to shortly. Mood
of the boardroom last week. Obviously, there were good and bad for the government in there. But let's focus on government spending, which is, we've got a structural deficit in this country and we're not going to get out of it for, 3-4 years from now. Will you go harder on cutting government spending after, the election or next budget? Is this even on your books?
Well, what's on my books is just continuous improvement of the public service, period. We want to make sure there's maximum value for money. We want to make sure...
Yeah, but what about the cost of it? That's what the mood of the boardroom is talking about, Prime Minister, is the cost of the public service.
Well, again, I'd just say what our focus has been this year, this term has been to make sure that we actually cut back on the bureaucracy in the back office.
But we're
and that
still
any savings
spending.
generated in the back
Government
office are
spending
deployed
is
into the
going
front line.
up. Debt is going up.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan, I'm sorry, you got a delay there. Yes, the reality is, yes, that's the short term in the next couple of years, but we have a plan, as we're saying, to taper that off. The choices are very simple. Carry on with the old model of tax more, spend more, borrow more, or alternatively put the car into reverse and go into hard austerity. And we're finding a middle pathway through that. We're doing the sensible things for the long term. Major reform on RMA, education, trade and investment, defence, law and order have been really big hallmarks of this government in this term, and we continue to actually then make sure we get better delivery out of public service. I think there's a big way to reimagine our public services. I think technology-enabled, customer-focused, large service organisations is kind of where we've got to be able to get to, where actually they respond just like service organisations do in the private sector as well.
Local government, I saw they had early results. This is from early voting for Auckland Council. I think it was like 10% of people had voted. There's 2 weeks to go. We normally get to like 38 to 40%. How do you see that as anything but a wholesale rejection or vote of no confidence in local government altogether? And, when are you going to get rid of some of these councils?
Well, I'll just say, I get the frustration with local government. We've got many very good mayors across the country and councils that are doing an exceptionally good job. But if you care about your rates being up 12.5%, then you got to vote. If you care about actually your pipes or your roads or your rubbish collection, then you've got to get out and vote. And democracy is a pretty special thing, and I've met Ukrainian soldiers fighting for democracy, and I'm telling you, if you care about your representation, either A, go and get involved if you think you'd be a better candidate and actually want to go in and do something and fight for your community and represent your people in your community, then you can do that at any time. Equally, councils and candidates that are standing got to make the case for why they should be exciting people to come out and vote for them.
All right. Appreciate your time this morning. We better let you go. Prime Minister, thank you. Christopher Luxon in Wellington at Parliament.